start.
Sure. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, my name is Ruben Murillo, President of the Nevada State Education Association. The Nevada State Education Association represents teachers and education support professionals across the state. NSEA strongly believes the Nevada plan needs to be updated to reflect the changing needs of Nevada. NSEA has consistently advocated moving towards greater equity in education, ensuring all school districts, including Clark County, have the resources necessary to provide a high-quality education for every Nevada student. We agree our school funding system should be transparent and based on the needs of our students and communities. It is only fair for all education stakeholders to be included in any serious effort to improve our state's public schools. Now, NSEA opposes SB543 as written, as introduced to institute a new school funding formula due to serious policy concerns, including no new revenue for schools, a rural freeze and squeeze, watering down of Zoom and Victory schools, a multi-million-dollar charter school giveaway, anti-union and the fund balance provisions, and possible exclusion of educators' voices on the Commission of School Funding, and a fundamentally flawed process. We do want to thank you and Senator Dennis for coming up with the framework to move forward. It had to begin somewhere. And so we believe that this framework, when adequately modified through amendments which are already being proposed, we appreciate that. We do also appreciate listening to some of the concerns, because one of the amendments that was made regarding the freeze and squeeze was appreciated. I believe it needs to go a little further, but we thank you again.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening, Alexandra Marks with the Nevada State Education Association. This session we've heard the phrase unfunded mandate quite a bit, and don't pass this bill until it's properly funded, and I think this bill's kind of no different in that regard. Given the chronic underfunding of public education in Nevada, no new funding model will work without new and additional revenue. This plan simply moves money from one area of Nevada to another, creating new winners and losers. We think it's a misnomer to call this a student-centered plan when it takes from certain students and gives to others. In February, hundreds of educators from across Nevada rallied under the banner of Red for Ed to draw attention to chronic underfunding of public education. We'll be doing this again tomorrow evening at 5 o'clock. Despite recent efforts, Nevada continues to rank near the bottom of states in most metrics. In the 2018 Quality Counts report from Education Week, Nevada ranked 47th in per pupil funding and dead last in both class size and overall education quality. After the 2017 legislative session, with modest increases to public education funding, school districts across the state continue to struggle with serious budget deficits. School districts are projecting shortfalls for the upcoming biennium as well. There are discussions of possible educator layoffs, a risk of moving to even larger class sizes, and higher ratios for other licensed educational personnel. The Gwynn Center recently published a report showing $107.5 million combined budget shortfall anticipated for school districts in fiscal year 19 and 20. This is due in large part to the per pupil base funding increases that are outpaced by increases in annual operating costs. This week, SB 545, which would move the marijuana excise tax to increase school funding, is desperately needed to address these shortfalls. Movement of this money to fund our schools continues to be a top priority of NSCA for this session, as it was in the 2017 session, and we applaud this introduction. While this bill will help cover the cost of educator raises next year, will only temporarily stop the bleeding. Nevada schools will remain chronically underfunded. The Nevada Constitution requires all public schools receive adequate funding to fulfill their duty to educate every Nevada student. NSCA will continue our work to make sure Nevada moves the needle to provide adequate funding for the basic operation of public schools, ensuring every Nevada student has access to high-quality public education. We are sorry to say that there is no new revenue included in SB 543. Some kids will win, others will lose. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
My name is Bryan Rippett. I'm a chemistry and physics teacher in Douglas County, and I'm also the president-elect of the Nevada State Education Association. And I want to focus on some opposition to this bill that relates to Section 15 or 15-2, and it's been referred to as hold harmless. It states that no school district receives less money in a school year than the school district received in the immediately preceding school year. I believe that this is a gross misuse of the term hold harmless. It's not just a misnomer, it's verbal irony. The true effect of this provision will inflict great harm on my home school district and most of the school districts in Nevada. To use a term I just picked up from Mr. Aguero, hold harmless in this sense is political fiction. The more descriptive term has recently been used. It's a rural freeze and squeeze while they suffocate. This was clarified by Assemblywoman Titus, and Speaker Frierson also spoke to or asked a question with the diminishing value of $1 over time. I'd like to use an analogy that our 17 school districts are a first grade classroom, a cohort of students in a first grade class. And this is what we're telling them. Last year, while you were in kindergarten, we watched what you all ate. We took great notes, did great studies, and we realized you are all malnourished. So what we're going to do is allow you to eat more this year. Every single district, every single child will get some more. But when you're in second grade, 14 out of 17 you will be frozen at your current caloric intake. Don't worry. Some of you will come off of that plan. By the time you're in fourth grade, 2 more of you, so now 5 of the 17 will be able to grow. By fifth grade, 12 of the 17 school districts, or 12 of the 17 kids, would be the same funding, or in my analogy, the same caloric intake they had as second graders. As these kids grow and change, and our district's needs grow and change, this is not acceptable. By the time puberty hits, 7th, 8th, 9th grade, Elko, Douglas, Story, Eureka, White Pine, and Nye County all are estimated to be frozen at first grade levels. In section 9.2, Mr. Aguero pointed out that the base must be kept whole and increased based on enrollment and inflation. I urge you to look for, write, and or accept an amendment that provides the same increase for inflation and enrollment to every school district starting with the next fiscal year. Avoid the freeze and squeeze. Avoid suffocation. Thank you.
Next.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Natha Anderson, and it is my honor and pleasure to be a 22-year teacher. Currently, I'm serving as president of the Washoe Education Association, and it pains me to stand in here to testify in opposition because there are many parts of this bill that I agree with. For example, making the funding transparent is very important for us to have. There are some other areas also that are very important for us to continue to do. However, at this time, I am opposed unless amended. In particular, I'm just going to bring up one area because I know that there's a few other areas as well. And that has to do with the successful Zoom and Victory School models. SB543 would eliminate these current categorical expenditures. Instead of funding, the funding will flow through the state education fund, and then a portion will go to address our additional education needs of our English language learners and our at-risk pupils. While a menu of services related to the current Zoom and Victory programs are to be made available to all English learners and at-risk students, it seems unlikely that the existing Zoom and Victory schools will continue to be as strong as they currently are and to be able to maintain those current level of services. The current model will basically be leveled down. And by shifting these funds away from our schools to a pupil-centered approach, Zoom and Victory schools will lose significant momentum on school climate and culture, jeopardizing the gains that we have made for many of our students. Language is limiting, the current language in the bill is limiting the application of student weights to an either or approach, which runs counter to educational best practices that recognizes our most impacted students fall into multiple categories, which was brought up earlier by Assembly Member Spiegel. We need to do better for our students. This need is far greater in students and communities that are beset with serious, intractable social and economic issues. Please consider making these amendments so the funding formula can go forward in the proper fashion. Thank you for your consideration and for your time tonight.
Thank you. I believe we have NSCA speakers in Southern Nevada. Is that correct, Mr. Lee? It is? Okay. We'll go to Las Vegas.
Good evening. My name's Tom Wellman, and I have been sitting here since 1967. I am a retired educator from the Clark County School District. I worked as a classroom teacher and a school counselor for 32 years. I live in Assembly Senate District 1, and I am now the president of NSCAR. This year, when this bill was proposed, NSCA set out to survey members, and over 430 frontline classroom educators stepped up and filled out the survey and expressed concerns and reservations about SB543. My peers and I are here tonight to share some snippets from their letters with you. This first letter is from a social worker for the state of Nevada. I see firsthand every day the impact that schools and teachers have on our children and community. We cannot cut funding in our districts of rural Nevada. You will have played a part in failing our children and our educators. I would be happy to testify before any committee, any town hall, about the services that our schools provide. The direct impact they have on more than just education, but the day-to-day lives of the students. They know our children better than anyone, sometimes including the parents. Do not cut corners when it comes to our educators. The second letter, we, as a rural school, receive very little resources as it is. So if they are cuts, any more cuts, we will be down to nothing. This is not fair to our students. We try our hardest to work with what we get, and I've been here for 20 years and still have to provide my own resources in order to teach to my potential. And if funds are frozen, I won't be able to do that. We talk about equity in the schools, but this bill directly opposes equity. Please remember, the devil's in the details, and these educators, these frontline personnel, deserve to be heard as you craft this bill. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening. Good evening. My name is Harry Bell. I live in Legislative District 3 and in Senate District 3, but I'm going to do what Tom did and read a couple of letters coming from the rurals into the record here. This is the first letter. I teach special education students in a self-contained program in Nye County. My students have extremely high needs, including equipment and specialized materials in order to meet their special circumstances. A freeze would affect my ability to meet my students' needs for their education. My school district, Nye County, has 2/3 of its students on free or reduced lunch. An increase in expenses or enrollments would do severe harm to our students. Here's the second letter. As an educator and a resident of a rural county, I urge you to oppose SB 543. The impact of this bill will have on my school and community cannot be understated. With no new revenue contemplated in this bill, the proposed shift in the funding formula would harm my school district by freezing our revenues at current levels. This freeze would decimate rural districts while creating new winners and losers. Proponents have stated this bill contains a hold harmless provision. However, this is not a true hold harmless. This is a freeze and squeeze. During the freeze, this formula contemplates no revenue increases to cover the cost of doing business or increases in enrollment. This would squeeze many districts like mine and leave us to wither on the vine. Instead of pitting districts against one another, as SB 543 will do, this bill needs to be amended to account for growth and the cost of doing business. Unless that changes, I urge you to oppose this bill. I am a teacher and I teach kindergarten. I have 24 students in my room, including both ELL students and students with special needs. This freeze will not allow us teachers, districts, or administrators to support their needs. This is not fair to rural Nevada. Please vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening. My name is Connie Seitz. I taught school for 35 years. I'm now the president of the Uniserve Council of Nevada, retired. I'm opposed to Senate Bill 543. I'm appearing today on behalf of Benjamin Spence, a teacher in Carson City. I'm reading a summary of his letter to the legislator. SB 543 violates one of the core principles held by the Nevada State Legislature, specifically that we hold the education of all of our youth in the highest regard. The impact that this bill will have on my school and community cannot be overstated. With no new revenue, the proposed shift in the funding formula will harm my school district by freezing our revenue at current levels. The freeze will utterly destroy the rural districts. Proponents have stated this bill contains a hold harmless provision. However, the provision is not a true hold harmless provision. The bill will result in a lack of revenue, which will leave rural districts in distress as enrollment increases. Instead of pitting districts against one another, as SB 543 will do, this bill needs to be amended to account for growth. Unless the bill is amended, I strongly urge you to oppose it. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll come back to Carson City for additional NSCA speakers.
Thank you, Chair Woodhouse and Chair Carlton. NSCA opposes SB 543 in part because it is a multi-million-dollar giveaway to charter schools. One of the biggest recipients, projected beneficiaries of SB 543 are Nevada's.
Please.
Sorry, my name is Bryan Lee. I'm the Executive Director of the Nevada State Education Association. One of the biggest beneficiaries of SB 543 are Nevada's charter schools. According to data included in Mr. Aguero's presentation, charter schools would be the recipients of a multi-million-dollar giveaway, receiving a projected $28 million increase when the new funding formula is implemented. This rivals the increase that would be received by the much larger Washoe County School District. While freezing and squeezing funding for most of Nevada's rural school districts, the windfall for charter schools in this plan is movement of precious resources away from traditional schools to charter schools. Over the last 22 years, the explosive growth in charter schools in Nevada has been driven in part by a deliberate and well-funded effort to ensure that charters are exempted from basic safeguards and standards that apply to public schools. This growth has undermined local public schools and communities without producing any overall increase in student learning or growth. It is important to note in most recent studies, public schools have been shown to outperform charter schools when accounting for student demographics. Moving precious dollars away from traditional public schools to charter schools, especially without ensuring appropriate controls and accountability of those schools, is foolhardy and will send the wrong message. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening. Excuse me. My name is Robert Munson. I am a 21-year teacher in Washoe County, and it's been a long day since I started this morning at 7:30. I'm here to represent the NSCA and WEA as we oppose this bill in its current form. Its anti-union and fund balance provisions are one of the reasons for this opposition. During this legislative session, there has been significant contemplation of how to treat the end fund balance that is not subject to collective bargaining. Excuse me. Currently, this is set for school districts in the Nevada Administrative Code at not more than 8.3%. Senate Bill 26 would have put this language into the NRS. However, it did not come out of the Senate Committee on Government Affairs. If passed, Senate Bill 111 clarifies that any monies from the state intended for salary or benefits for the employees of the school district is subject to negotiations with any employee organization. Language in SB 543 to set the end fund balance for school districts not subject to collective bargaining at 16.6% is a gross departure from this current practice, policy, and direction of this legislative session. We believe that this is an anti-union and anti-collective bargaining provision that could wall off as much as $740 million from collective bargaining processes with school districts in the FY21 school year. So for these reasons, we oppose this bill at this current time in its current form. Thank you for your work on behalf of Nevada students. Our kids are looking for equity in their education funding, and we know that you can get to that if you work at it. Thank you, and have a good evening.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening. My name is Dawn Miller. I am a music teacher in Washoe County and the vice president-elect of NSCA. A significant role NSCA plays is to elevate the voice of educators from around the state in decisions impacting schools and the education profession. SB543 creates a commission on education funding and gives the commission significant powers and responsibilities. While SB543 does require relevant experience in public education, it does not require any educator representation on the commission. There are many technical aspects to the duties of the commission. However, there are also critical policies, responsibilities that would greatly impact public education in our state. This includes recommending to the governor an optimal level of funding education, making recommendations to improve the implementation of the new funding formula, recommending weights for English learners, at-risk students, and students with disabilities, or recommending new categories of student weights, making recommendations and laws and regulations impacting public education, and adopting regulations prescribing administrative expenses allowed by school districts. A commission with such profound impact on public education in our state should be representative of key education stakeholders. Educators who are on the front line at our school sites need to be included on such an important body. So with no educator representative, we also stand in opposition of SB 543. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening, Madam Chair and committee members. I appreciate this opportunity to speak. My name is Phil Sorenson. I'm a science teacher in Douglas County, Nevada. I've taught there since 1989. I'm also the president of the Douglas County Professional Education Association, and I'm here to speak in opposition to this bill. Recently, my school posted a teaching position. We had one unqualified applicant. One. Why might this be? I'll tell you why. Housing costs in Douglas County are much higher than in Clark County and at best equal to Washoe's housing costs. The new teachers cannot afford to live in Douglas, and veteran teachers struggle to make ends meet. The 6-year funding freeze will squeeze our district and exacerbate this problem. The freeze is the equivalent of about 100 Douglas teachers. We have about 360 teachers total in our district. If these positions are cut over the next 6-year freeze period, the Douglas County School District will lose 1/4 of its teachers. This will drive up class sizes while simultaneously reducing learning opportunities for our students. My rural is not alone. Virtually every other rural will face financial hardship, while a few districts, including the Charter Authority, will see a benefit from increased funding. I'm opposed to SB 543 in its current form because it will do irreparable harm to Nevada's rural school districts. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Madam Chair, Chris Daly, Nevada State Education Association. Hopefully, well, almost the last speaker in opposition to SB 543. My section is entitled Moving Forward Together. So NSCA opposes SB 543. But we are hopeful that we can begin anew, taking the promising components of the proposal forward while correcting the problems, oversights, and unintended consequences. New revenue will ease the transition to any new funding formula, and NSCA is optimistic about our continuing fight for additional school resources so all students and all schools and all school districts in Nevada can succeed. our struggle continues. And as previously mentioned, we'd like to invite everyone here at the support table, at the opposed table, on the dais, to join tens of thousands of educators across the West wearing red for ed and fighting for better school funding here in Nevada and California and states across this country. So NSCA has submitted some proposed amendments to SB 543. These amendments have 5 main objectives. First, our amendments provide a true hold harmless, preventing the freeze in funding for rural districts and providing for growth in funding in proportion to the average increase in statewide per pupil funding. They grandfather in current Zoom and Victory schools to preserve these successful programs. Next, they provide that charter schools only receive a cost adjustment if they are negotiating with a recognized employee organization pursuant to Chapter 288 of NRS and receive a proportionately lower multiplier if they enroll lower percentage of pupils in the weighted categories compared to their county-wide percentage to discourage charter schools from cherry picking. The amendments specifically include educator voice on the Commission on School Funding, and finally, they eliminate the restriction on the use of the school district's end fund balance, which has been the direction so far in the session of Senator Parks' committee. Despite the challenges getting to this point, NSCA stands ready to work with legislators on this bill and remains committed to doing the difficult work to generate new revenue so we can ensure a high-quality education for every Nevada student. Thank you.